Now, thousands of Mozambicans are fleeing deadly post-election violence after massive nationwide protests temporarily closed mines and border crossings, as well as disrupted key trade routes. So what's the way forward? It all started a day after a relatively peaceful October 9th presidential election in Mozambique. Now, the main opposition leader, Venancio Mondlane of the Podemos party, declared victory over the ruling Frelimo party's candidate, Daniel Chapo. Now, Mondlane claimed a partial parallel count, but his team gave him a majority of votes. 6 days later, Mondlane called on his supporters to protest against the handling of the elections, which civil society groups, local and foreign observers said had significant irregularities and fraud. On October 19th, an unknown gunman murdered Mondlane's lawyer, Elvino Diaz, was preparing a legal challenge to the election results, and Paulo Guambe, a Podemos parliamentary candidate, as the two men traveled together in a car in Maputo. The first nationwide protest was held on October 21st. It was dispersed by the security forces who fired live ammunition at demonstrators in several cities, prompting Mondlane to flee to a secret hideout. 3 days later, election officials announced that the governing party's Chapo won with 71% of the vote, while Mondlane got 20%. This led to more protests and looting that have paralyzed various cities across the country, including the port that neighboring landlocked countries depend on. On November 7th, South Africa temporarily closed its mainland border with Mozambique as protesters attempted to cross, with South African police firing rubber bullets in a bid to push them back. And on December 23rd, Mozambique's top court confirmed the governing party's Frelimo had retained its nearly 50-year grip on power, but revised the election margins, giving Chapo 65% of the vote to Mondlane's 24%. Now, this triggered more demonstrations that have already killed hundreds of people. Police say at least 6,000 prisoners escaped from a high-security prison in the capital, Maputo, on December 25th. But rights groups accuse security forces of rounding up protesters in the guise of looking for escaped prisoners and killing them after some of them were found dead. Well, thousands of people have been fleeing the violent protests that have been going on for about 2 months. Lamek Masina traveled to Malawi's border with Mozambique and spoke to some of them. He brings us this report from Nsanje district.
Patricia Chale and her 3 children fled to Malawi on December 23rd after violent protests erupted when the Constitutional Council confirmed that the ruling Frelimo party won the October disputed election.
One afternoon, when we were at a borehole fetching water, we saw a group of people coming to our home and setting fire to our houses. They carried machetes and axes. They were destroying houses. They ran in different directions. Some people were hacked in the process.
A local monitoring group, Plataforma Decide, says that hundreds of people have been killed so far. Charlie says she doesn't know the whereabouts of her husband.
I've lost my goats, chickens, and even clothes. I have one set of clothing which I'm wearing. I can't even wash it because I don't have other clothes to put on.
The influx of Mozambican refugees into Malawi comes at a time when about 5 million people in the country are facing food shortages because of an El Niño-induced drought.
Since we came here on December 24th, we have been facing a food shortage problem. Children are collapsing because of hunger. We sometimes spend 4 days without taking any food. Sometimes we're given 1 cup of maize flour to cook porridge.
Government departments and development partners here are now assisting the asylum seekers, but the representatives of refugees here say still more assistance is needed, especially for women and children.
The main issue here is these people are in great need of food. They want to be as healthy as they were before coming here. This is just a temporary place. They don't have enough clothes. There are no mosquito nets and there are no sanitation facilities here. We also need latrines and tents.
Authorities from Malawi's Department of Refugees and the UNHCR are conducting assessments to identify the needs of those can qualify for refugee status.
So the numbers on a day-to-day have been increasing. However, we through the screening process, we're coming across a number of challenges where maybe different perceptions amongst the communities. We have seen some cases of fraud. So through our screening, we are able to sieve off some of the cases that do not benefit to be registered as asylum seekers.
Kausiwa says that people that have been denied refugee status include Malawian nationals who were staying in Mozambique, and they have now fled the conflict, seeking safety in their own country. In the meantime, the Malawi government authorities say they have secured a piece of land to accommodate all the Mozambican nationals who have sought refuge in different areas of Nsanje district as they wait for a peaceful resolution to the violence that has uprooted their lives. Lamek Masina, Africa Matters, Nsanje district, Malawi.
Now let's hear more from Tembisa Fakude. He's a senior research fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogues. He joins me from Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you for talking to us here on Africa Matters. Now, are the protests a broader show of dissatisfaction with Frelimo's 49-year rule, or are they just about, disgruntled election results?
Well, yeah, I think it's the phenomenon throughout the region that you have these young people and many other voters who are really dissatisfied, not only in Mozambique, but in other parts of the region, including Botswana, South Africa, and others, and Namibia, of course. They've just had their own election. So you see a dissatisfaction of disservice by the traditional liberators or these parties or political parties that have been around before, at least 7-8 years after democratization. So this is a challenge that I think many African countries are going to be facing moving forward.
So Fakude, for you, it's not about a constitutional crisis, but it is about a political crisis that Mozambique is currently facing.
Indeed, it's a political crisis, as I've said. It's a phenomenon that's dominating the regional politics. So you have Mozambicans who are taken for granted. I mean, the fact that you're going to have Daniel Chapo garnering over 71% at least the initial elections, that was ridiculous. I mean, taking people for granted. There's absolutely no way that you have got or garnered so much votes, given that there's been a very fierce and a clear opposition from the Mozambicans. And I think that's what made many people upset, that they've been taken for granted. And they do feel that these elections were rigged. And judging by the numbers, you can't argue with them. Of course, the numbers have since been revised to 67%, but even that is still problematic.
Right, but what we are seeing is that neither Mondlane nor the government seems to be ready to back down. So what will they need to work out if it happens?
Well, unfortunately, it's an African phenomenon. You'll eventually have a compromise where Mr. Mondlane might just be given a position just to calm him down and stop him from continuing calling for protests. But even that doesn't solve the problem of democratization of Mozambique and the development of democracy in that country. I think what might just help is the second round of elections. I think that might the only thing that could solve the problem. I know South Africa and other regional countries are trying to get involved in negotiating, but I think you need a much more open process in these elections by calling for second election.
So how has the deadly protest, post-election violence affected the region so far? And what's the fallout if it continues?
Well, so far we hear that there's been an influx of people, not in large numbers, but people are beginning to move, particularly to Eswatini. The challenge, of course, in the region is that we've got very poor borders. And if the situation was to worsen, you are likely to have more people, particularly refugees, moving from Mozambique to South Africa and other neighboring countries. And if that happens, you are going to have a problem. As it is, there's a lot of pushback towards immigration and refugees coming, particularly to South Africa. So if Mozambicans were also to start making the same journey, that will put a strain not only in the economy, infrastructure of South Africa, which is the country most Mozambicans are likely to come to. So until then, we have to hope that they find a solution sooner than later.
So Fakude, do you think the regional bloc, that is SADC, has ignored the Mozambique crisis as accused? And what can they realistically do as we speak?
Well, they can't do much. They've always ignored every sensitive conflict. They've been putting kids' gloves and dealing with Zimbabwe. I doubt if SADC will be even firmer dealing with a fellow comrade in the form of Daniel Chapo and Frelimo. So they have, of course, forsaken and unfortunately neglected a very important political intervention. And as it's always been the case, they will have to wait until the situation deteriorates before they can intervene. So we're not really optimistic, and the people in the region are not really optimistic that SADC will actually find any lasting solution in the current standoff in Mozambique.
But then, recently we heard the president-elect, Daniel Chapo, saying that he's ready for dialogue. Should a dialogue happen, he's ready for dialogue. But on the other hand, we are seeing, the opposition leader, that is Venancio Mondlane, saying that I want these elections and I want that seat as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's a challenging and complicated position. I think the best to do is have renewed elections, put systems in place that are not going to be doubted by the masses of Mozambicans. And I think that's the only way that we might find a way forward. But as it stands, both parties are digging in their heels in terms of moving forward without really solving the problem. As you correctly put it, Venancio Mondlane is very serious about continuing and insisting that he's won. Of course, he has not won overwhelmingly, but again, until he is put at ease in terms of political assurances that the process was fair and fair, you are likely to see this protest continuing in Mozambique.
All right. So, the president-elect Chapo is due to be sworn in on the 15th of January. And the same day, Mondlane also says he'll return to the country from exile. So what is the way forward for the country?
Well, there's no way forward. It depends where is Mr. Venancio Mondlane is exiled at the moment. Many people believe he's spending most of his time in South Africa, but we don't know precisely where he is. And I think the hosting country will have to play a role. If it's South Africa, it will have to play a role in putting pressure on Mr. Mondlane to go back and engage in a political process. But as I said, I don't think that the people of Mozambique, particularly those that are protesting at the moment, will accept anything but a victory for their supported candidate. In this case, Mr. Venancio Mondlane is likely to be the one supported compared to a Frelimo candidate, Daniel Chapo, who has, by the look of things, being rejected by many, at least young people on the streets of Mozambique. Right. Thembisa Fakude, a senior research fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogues. Thank you for talking to us here on Africa Matters. Street traders in Kenya's capital are being ordered to move to designated back streets and regulated pop-up markets. It's a move aimed at easing the congested central business district, but there's been a mixed reaction, as Alexandria Mazala reports.
For decades, the streets of Nairobi have been a place for trade. Street vendors known as hawkers set up business in the 1940s when women sold charcoal, agricultural produce, and handicrafts. Today, they sell electronics, shoes, clothes, fresh produce, books and toys. But their popularity comes at a price.
Congestion and lack of walkways for pedestrians. Also, we have blockage of other shop or stall owners who pay licenses and other rates to the county government, and also they make the streets a bit chaotic and in some instances dirty.
So Mugambi has put forward a bill that asks the county executive to allocate designated market zones and register the hawkers.
The number of hawkers in the CBD is quite large. In the past, they already designated market spaces, and those market spaces are still not able to hold the number of vendors. There are many who set up just outside these designated markets for a lack of space inside. So when they say they'll designate space for us, I don't think it will work. They need to come up with another solution.
The government cites pollution as one of the main reasons for changing things. Markets like Gikomba create a mess, while some of the market stalls are clearly unsafe. This attempt to organize the city's trade culture comes after the city council designated specific trading hours for the street vendors earlier this year.
Unregulated street vending poses a hurdle to city mobility, with pedestrians struggling to make their way through sidewalks. Aside from this challenge, city council officers regularly exploit traders by collecting bribes and harassing them. This bill seeks to change that.
But many ignore the new rules and set up shop way before 4 p.m. The number of hawkers has also grown. The Nairobi City Council Licensing Department estimates that there were about 30,000 hawkers in the city in 1984. But this has grown to 50,000 today, causing congestion and chaos on the capital streets.
This is an important thing because town is very congested.
As the government marches forward with plans to implement the bill, others in the private sector have already established organized pop-up markets. They've gained popularity, particularly on weekends, giving Kenyans an alternative way to shop. Alexandria Majala, Africa Matters, Nairobi, Kenya.
To Nigeria now, where coastal communities, like many around the world, are facing huge challenges due to rising sea levels caused by the climate crisis. Villages along the coastal line and entire livelihoods are being swallowed up by an advancing ocean, as Dolapo Adreninoku reports.
The coastal village of Akodo-Ishe in Lagos was once known for its coconut palms and lush vegetation. But that has now become a distant memory as the landscape changes, affecting livelihoods and making it difficult for Kadiri Akorede to feed his family of 5.
We used to catch about 500 to 600 kilos of fish, but since the occurrence of this incident, we hardly get up to 100 kilos. Even the 100 could be once in 6 months. It's affecting business, let alone my family. Things are so hard that we only eat what we see.
The head of the community, known as Bale, lost his properties. Now he, his wife and 4 children have to share accommodation with the other villagers.
It affects me.
I have been reduced to someone who has to live in someone else's house. The ocean has swallowed up many houses in the community, destroyed our landmarks, our boats. This mostly happens at night when we are asleep.
Mama Alaka, who has lived all her life in the community, also lost everything last year, forcing the 89-year-old woman to sleep in a local kitchen in the village.
We were sleeping that fateful day. When the flood came and everybody woke up, by the time we woke up, everywhere was filled with water. We were in shock. We were scared that the ocean would carry us away. It swept away a lot of our properties. It even swept away the graves of our loved ones. We appealed to the authorities to come to our rescue and help us fix this problem.
7 years ago, this was once a massive coconut belt. It used to be part of a scenic shoreline that also brought economic gains for the fishing community. Extreme weather continues to pose as a major issue globally, and some communities are suffering the consequences much more than others.
So our biggest environmental challenge is the exacerbated sea rise and strengthening of the waves. So we're getting a lot more erosion. A lot of our coast is just being wiped out almost overnight. We're experiencing more global warming than has ever been recorded in the history of humanity. This year and 2023, the 2 hottest years ever recorded.
Akodo isn't the only community affected. There are others along the shoreline that have lost their homes, and it's only a matter of time before the ocean surges and coastal erosion destroy what they have left. Dolapo Adreninoku, Africa Matters, Lagos, Nigeria.
To Cameroon, where marine biologist Aristide Takukam Kamla has devoted his career to protect the endangered African manatees in Lake Ossa. The mammals live in the coastal waters of at least 21 countries along Africa's Atlantic coast. Kamla's love for the aquatic mammals put him in the global spotlight in May, where he was awarded the prestigious Whitley Award, often referred to as Green Oscars, as Rupert Toon reports.
Cameroonian marine biologist Aristide Tukukam Kamla is a man on a mission. He spends most of his time on the surface of Lake Ossa, keeping track of the number of African manatees whose habitat is in danger. Spotting them is not easy. They are spotted by following the trails of bubbles from the shy creatures when they come up for air.
Not everywhere where you go are you going to be able to see any African manatees at all. And here, to be able to see 5 in a single period is huge, and he has made a really big impact on conservation work, and just demonstrating what he does here can inspire researchers throughout West and Central Africa.
However, Kamla's work at the lake has been hindered by poaching of the aquatic mammals and encroachment of their habitat by fishermen.
I have to fish. I've built myself off that. I do everything because of that. If you want to impose bans, you will have to pay me every month.
A few years ago, restaurants at the village sold manatee meat as a special meal, but a ban on the meat was put in place.
At the time I created MCO, manatee poaching was really rampant here. But with the conservation programs that we put in place, such as education, collaboration with the conservation department, the patrols that we did here, the surveillance, and also above all, the income-generating activities, we were able to practically put an end to manatee poaching.
However, another environmental threat still remains.
This is another problem, pollution. Even the smell you can get, it's very strong.
A palm oil refinery near the lake dumps its waste into the water. And the giant salvania, an aquatic fern, has also become a major invasive species in the lake, threatening manatees' ecosystem.
We estimated like 265 manatees. Yeah, but that was in 2016 when there was no salvinia. And now that salvinia came, I think it has impacted that number, and we have to conduct another survey to determine exactly how many there are.
Kamla also runs the African Marine Mammal Conservation Organisation, which he uses for research and for carrying out civic education. Some fishermen at Lake Ossa have some sympathy for Kamla's passion for manatees, but the marine biologist is keen to inspire them to join him in protecting the manatees, which play a crucial role in maintaining a healthy ecosystem by consuming large quantities of water hyacinth and other invasive species. Rupert Stone, Africa Matters.
Our final stop is in the Ivory Coast now, where it was once a crime for artists to create graffiti on walls. However, the country's capital is now embracing the art and using it to revamp its streets. Emre Boz has more.
The streets of Abidjan Plateau district are at the economic heart of the Ivory Coast. Intricate graffiti artwork adorns the exteriors of international hotels and inspired the country's inaugural Ivory Graph Graffiti Festival. The event brought together 40 national and international artists who displayed their best graffiti pieces.
In Paris, people will look at us, they'll be blasé, they'll look at someone painting, they'll say, here's someone writing nonsense on the wall, whereas here it's generally well received. I love sharing, that's why I'm telling you about it.
The artists have turned the walls of Ivory Coast into a concrete 300-meter-long canvas, creating a street gallery. Each piece has a different message.
Because our graffiti I painted, but it's not for me. I painted now, yes, now it's for me, but once I leave, it's for the people who get to see it every day. So the story needs to speak to them, and they need to be able to relate to it. They need to be able to get something from it, for them to respect it, and for them to actually learn from it.
Ivorian artist Angela Goussan says the festival has helped shift the way Ivorians think about graffiti.
My dream for the future is to teach street art to students and young people who want to take an interest in this style of art.
We want to work for our country and its cultural development, as it is the first festival of urban art in Ivory Coast, and we are proud. We are lucky to have among us people who have experience. In Senegal, for example, they have had festivals for more than 15 years and invited international artists.
Artists like Goussan now hope that their work will create vivid and long-lasting memories for everyone who comes to the Ivory Coast. Emre Boz, Africa Matters.
That's our show this week. Share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you've seen on this episode or ideas on what you'd like us to cover on YouTube or on X using the hashtag Africa Matters. Thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from me, Brenda Radido.